Have you ever walked into a room carrying the invisible weight of a difficult day, not saying a word about it, keeping your voice steady, your face composed, doing everything you consciously know how to do to hold it together? And within moments, the baby who had been perfectly content is now fussing, is now reaching for you with an urgency that was not there a minute ago, is now unsettled in a way that has no obvious cause, as if they picked up a signal that you were certain you had not sent, as if something passed between you that moved through the air without words, without sound, without any channel of communication that you were deliberately using. And have you ever stood there in that moment, holding a baby who is upset about something you thought you had successfully hidden, and felt the slightly unnerving suspicion that this small person, this creature who cannot yet speak or reason or consciously analyze anything, can somehow read you in a way that most adults cannot, can reach past the performance of your composure and find something truer underneath it, something you thought you had closed off, something you were sure was invisible. That suspicion is not paranoia, it is not wishful thinking, and it is not the kind of thing that a few reassuring words can dismiss. Because what the science of infant emotional perception has assembled over the last several decades is a body of evidence so consistent and so consequential that it demands to be taken seriously. Evidence that says, yes, the baby knows, not in the way that an adult analyzes a situation and arrives at a conclusion, but in a way that is older and faster and more direct than analysis, a way that bypasses the intellect entirely and operates at the level of the nervous system itself, a way that means the baby is not reading your mood. The baby is living inside it, absorbing it, being shaped by it in ways that are happening right now, in real time, underneath the surface of everything that is visible. The foundation of this story is a process called emotional contagion, and it is not unique to babies. It is a feature of the human nervous system at every age, the mechanism by which one person's emotional state spreads to another through the transmission of subtle signals in face, voice, posture, and movement, and through the activation of the mirror neuron system that we explored in an earlier script, which means that when you observe someone expressing an emotion, your own nervous system generates a partial representation of that emotional state. Your face micro-expressions shift toward the expressed emotion, your physiology changes in the direction of what you are observing, and you begin to feel, at some level and in some degree, what the person you're observing is feeling, not as a conscious inference, not as a reasoned conclusion, but as a direct, automatic, neurologically mediated transmission. In adults, this process is modulated by cognition, by context, by the vast library of experience and social understanding that allows us to interpret what we are receiving, to decide how much of it to let in, to maintain some degree of emotional independence from the people around us, even when their emotional states are highly activated. And this modulation, this buffering capacity, is the thing that allows adults to comfort a distressed person without themselves becoming overwhelmed, to be with grief without being consumed by it, to enter an emotionally charged environment and maintain enough regulatory capacity to be useful. Babies have no such buffering. The emotional contagion system in a baby is not modulated by cognitive evaluation, it is not filtered by experience or expectation or the social knowledge of when it is appropriate to absorb someone else's emotional state and when it is appropriate to maintain a boundary. It simply runs openly and completely, receiving the emotional broadcasts of the people in the environment and being moved by them with a directness and a totality that no adult nervous system experiences anymore, which is why the baby in the room with an anxious caregiver does not just notice the anxiety at a cognitive level and decide to respond to it. They become anxious, physiologically and neurologically. because the anxiety in the room has entered their system through the fastest and most automatic channels the human nervous system possesses and changed the biochemical state of their body in ways that produce the actual, real, felt experience of anxiety, even in a baby who has no capacity to name it, explain it, or understand its source. The research that most powerfully demonstrates the baby's sensitivity to caregiver emotional states is not the research on acute emotional responses, but the research on what happens when the emotional mismatch is chronic and sustained. When the caregiver is not having a bad day, but is living through a prolonged period of depression, anxiety, or unresolved stress. And here, the findings are both scientifically compelling and deeply important for anyone who cares about infant development. Because what researchers studying postnatal depression and caregiver mental health have found is that the emotional environment provided by a depressed or chronically anxious caregiver has measurable and lasting effects on the baby's developing stress response system. Effects that are visible in the baby's cortisol profiles, in the wiring of the baby's hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, in the sensitivity settings of the amygdala, in the regulatory capacity of the prefrontal connections that are being built during this exact sensitive period of development. And these effects are not the product of the baby consciously understanding that their caregiver is suffering. They are the product of the baby's nervous system continuously absorbing the emotional signal of the environment, continuously calibrating its own stress response settings against the baseline of what it encounters, continuously being shaped by the emotional temperature of the relationship, that is, in the most literal neurological sense, the primary environment of early development. A baby who lives in the consistent presence of a caregiver, whose emotional state is characterized by flatness, withdrawal, low responsiveness, unpredictable distress or anxiety, does not simply experience moments of discomfort in those states. They use those states as information about the world, as data that the stress response system uses to calibrate itself, to set its baseline sensitivity, to decide how much of a threat detection investment is warranted by the kind of environment this brain appears to be developing in. And a brain that calibrates its stress response system against a chronically stressed early environment builds a threat detection system that is set to a higher sensitivity, a lower threshold for alarm, a more reactive and less easily settled regulatory architecture. And this calibration, made in the first months of life, when the brain is most plastic and most responsive to environmental input, persists in the architecture of the nervous system for years, and in some ways, for decades after the environment that caused it has changed. Now here is the first twist, and it is one that almost nobody who has not specifically studied this research knows about, and it shifts the picture from slightly unsettling to genuinely remarkable. Babies do not just absorb the emotional states of their caregivers passively. They actively monitor caregiver emotional states as a primary source of information about the world, using the caregiver's emotional reactions as a guide to how they themselves should respond to novel, ambiguous, or potentially dangerous situations. And this process, which we touched on briefly in the stranger anxiety script under the name social referencing, is far more pervasive and far more consequential than most people realize, because it means that the baby is essentially outsourcing their emotional evaluation of the world to the people they trust, using the caregiver's face as a real-time commentary on the safety or danger of everything the baby encounters, and adjusting their own behavior accordingly with a sensitivity and a precision that is, when you see it documented in research, genuinely extraordinary. In the visual cliff experiment, one of the most famous paradigms in all of developmental psychology, babies placed on a glass surface above a simulated drop would look to their mother's face before deciding whether to cross, and babies whose mothers expressed fear or concern would refuse to cross, while babies whose mothers expressed a calm and encouraging face would move forward with confidence. demonstrating that the baby is not independently assessing the physical environment and coming to their own conclusion about its safety, but is reading the caregiver's emotional response and using it as the primary input into their own risk assessment, which means that the caregiver's emotional state is not just affecting the baby's internal experience, it is literally directing the baby's behavior in the world, shaping what the baby will and will not approach, explore, attempt, and risk. And by extension, shaping the baby's developing understanding of what the world contains that is safe and what it contains that is dangerous, what is worth moving toward and what is worth moving away from, which is the experiential foundation of everything, from confidence to caution to the willingness to try new things that will characterize this person's relationship with novelty and challenge for the rest of their life. Here is the second twist, and this one is perhaps the most immediately actionable and the most personally relevant finding in the entire script. Research on caregiver-infant emotional transmission has found that the baby's mood-sensing ability is not equally sensitive to all emotional channels. It is disproportionately sensitive to two specific signals above all others. And those signals are voice tone and touch quality, not facial expression, which is the channel that most adults intuitively believe is the primary one. Studies measuring infant physiological responses to caregiver emotional states under controlled conditions have found that babies' stress hormone levels are more reliably and more powerfully affected by the prosodic qualities of the caregiver's voice, its tension or ease, its rhythmic regularity or irregularity, the presence or absence of warmth in its melody, and by the quality of physical contact, whether the touch is smooth and confident and flowing or tense and hesitant and fragmented, than by the expression on the caregiver's face alone, which means that a caregiver who is anxious but has learned to control their facial expression is not, from the baby's neurological perspective, hiding very much, because the anxiety is still broadcasting through the voice and through the hands, through the quality of the hold and the rhythm of the rocking and the prosody of the words being spoken. And the baby's nervous system is picking it up with a sensitivity that the caregiver's own conscious awareness cannot match. This finding is important not because it means there is nowhere to hide from a baby, though in a real sense there is not, but because it points toward the specific channels through which emotional regulation can be most effectively transmitted, which means that when a caregiver who is struggling is able to consciously attend to the quality of their voice and their touch, to deliberately slow their breathing and let that slowness find its way into the pace and the warmth of how they speak and how they hold, they are working with the baby's most sensitive receiving channels, and the physiological benefits of that deliberate regulation flow directly and immediately into the baby's nervous system through exactly those channels, which is one of the most beautiful and most practical things that research on infant emotional perception has to offer. The information moves in both directions. The caregiver can use the knowledge of what the baby is receiving to guide the quality of what they send, and the practice of sending warmth and calm through voice and touch, even when it begins as a deliberate effort rather than a natural state, tends over time to produce the real thing. To create the internal state, it was initially only imitating, because the body leads and the mind follows, in ways that the growing body of research on embodied cognition continues to document. What all of this comes down to, when you hold it in a single view, is that the question, "Can babies sense your mood?" has an answer that is both simpler and more profound than the question itself implies. Simpler because the mechanism is not mystical or supernatural, it is neurological, it is the automatic operation of emotional contagion and social referencing and the extraordinarily sensitive receiver that the infant nervous system is, and more profound because the implications of that sensitivity reach far further than the immediate moment of a baby picking up on a parent's bad day, reaching all the way into the architecture of the developing nervous system, into the calibration of the stress response system, into the baby's emerging map of the world as safe or threatening, approaching or avoiding, known or unknown. And these are not temporary impressions that pass when the emotional weather changes. They are architectural. They are wired in. They become part of the structure of a nervous system that will carry them forward into every subsequent moment of the life it is building. And what this means, ultimately, for the parent or caregiver reading or hearing this, is not a message of pressure or guilt, but one of profound importance and profound empowerment. The emotional state you bring to your interactions with a baby is not background. It is not irrelevant. It is not something that happens beside the relationship. It is the relationship. It is the primary content of what the baby is receiving. It is the data from which the developing nervous system is drawing its most fundamental conclusions about the world, and the single most important thing you can do for the brain that is being built in your presence is not to provide the right toys or the right music or the right stimulation program. It is to find your own way back again and again and again to a state of sufficient calm and warmth and presence that the signal you're broadcasting is one that the baby's nervous system can use as a foundation for safety, because a baby who lives in the felt sense of a regulated, warm, present caregiver builds their nervous system on that foundation. And a foundation of safety is the thing from which all other human flourishing grows. Subscribe for more Mind Secrets.